Hello, welcome to the January 13th, 2026 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the live stream today. If you've not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could submit questions in advance by emailing clubcubase@steinberg.de or simply ask your questions in the chat field, and we'll go through all the questions chronologically as asked. When asking questions, it's always helpful if you could specify which version of Cubase that you're running or which Steinberg program version number. So if you're running something like Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, what version numbers? Is it 13, 14, 15? And the operating system, that information is often helpful. And when asking questions, realize that my ability to answer the questions in kind of a real-time manner will probably be I'll be unable to do that with the number of questions that come in. We will go through all the questions again chronologically as asked. So if we could avoid asking the same questions repeatedly, that would be appreciated. We have, and we should have an index of all topics that are covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field. So you can look for that with timestamps, so you could quickly navigate. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered on previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com. And we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that website. I think there's over 43,000 different topics. We also have two people that serve as moderators on the live streams. We have Jazz Dude and Agent K. So they're not Steinberg employees. They do this to make it a better community experience, and we appreciate their efforts. And we'll also give an extra round of gratitude for Jazz Dude for his unofficial Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful resource for the Steinberg community of different tutorials, links, videos, and just to, that's really beneficial for the Steinberg community. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, and I primarily focus on Steinberg products. And I'm the host today, and I'm presenting from Washington, D.C. area in the United States, just outside of D.C. in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching us live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. All right, so you see Tim K joining from Zeist in the Netherlands. His cat Buddy is waving a paw hello to my cat Steven and Stella, Mark Ravensdog, and other pets that are nearby. All right, so we have Kleis. I know I'm probably saying your name wrong. You know, you told me how to pronounce it, so I apologize if I mispronounce it. Checking in from Malmo, Sweden. Great to see you on. We have VS Terranova joining from the Netherlands. Stefan Larson joining from Sweden. We have Erf B saying hello from The Hague in the Netherlands. All right, we see Jazz Dude on. We see Soren from Sweden. All right, so we see from Parabot 2, first question. Hi, Greg. What's the best way to add stutter effects to an audio file? Thanks in Cubase 14 Pro. So the one plugin that I think is always kind of good for stutter effects that's included with Cubase is if we just go, and it's under the other category, and it's called Loop Mash FX. So let's say if we're playing along, and we could do all sorts of different stutter and chop effects and kind of DJ style effects. So if we want to go ahead and we'll just kind of play this project here. So we could say, okay, if we want it to, we could set kind of a rhythmic pulse as we come over here. So if I wanted to just, so now let's say, okay, I want this to be eighth notes, and then we could just come over here. Or if you wanted it to be, I'll come over here. So if you want it to be totally off, or if you want to make it 400% longer, 200%, or do different drops. So you could do stuff like that. And you may notice that this looks mysteriously like a piano keyboard. So if we want to come over, let's add a MIDI track. And we can set its output. And here we could just kind of set our side chain. And we'll just say, we'll come over here to the loop mash FX. And now we could have this MIDI track just, and now we can play MIDI. So if I want to open up a virtual keyboard here, let's see if I'm in the right octave. So you could actually kind of play these different so all those kind of stuff. If you wanted to kind of interactively play it like an instrument, you could do that. But check out again Loop Mash FX. And then you're able to kind of do different stutter effects quite effectively with that. All right, so you see from Soren, says, Greg, I sent you a song for feedback. Did you check it out? Does it need an intro, hi-hat gone, more room for vocals, calm down the drums? Yeah, if you want to discuss it, I'd be happy to do a quick Zoom with you, but just some like quick overall impressions. It seems like the synth, the one that had kind of maybe like the little flanging or filter sweeps, like when there was the male vocal, I thought was maybe a little too loud and taking away from the vocal. It was kind of right in the vocal frequency. I think if maybe you dropped that down an octave, that the vocal would cut through a little better. And then when there was the female singer part, I thought that the drums were a little too busy overall and didn't really have so much of a groove. And I felt that the drums there were, like maybe distracting from the vocal a bit. And if you have a way, to maybe a bridge section, I think like an intro could be good, but I'm not a huge fan of like extra long intros, but just to kind of state that. And if you have a point in the song that you could maybe take both vocal parts and have them trade off or together, stuff like that. But if you want to, I'd be happy to kind of discuss it more. If you want to do a Zoom on Thursday or Friday, if you want to email me, Soren, be happy to do that. But thought the writing was really clever. Thanks for sharing your music. All right, Arif asks, I have Cubase 15 Pro, the latest version on my Mac Studio. How can I put my older key commands in Cubase 15? I've created myself and want to use them in this version as well. So generally it's automatically carried over, but if you have like key commands from your like a prior version like Cubase 14 or 13, and we want to incorporate those, if you go to your edit menu in your previous one quick way of kind of migrating all of your preferences is go to your edit menu to Profile Manager, and in your previous one you could just come over here and export your profile, which would include all of your preferences, all your key commands, user presets, export that, and then import that particular file into Cubase 15 Pro. So that's probably what I would do. All right. So we see Matt Elston joining. We have Razel Zamini logging in from Denmark. We have Benny joining. And we have Vince joining from Winnipeg. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're well. All right, we have Brian Sawyer joining from Yuma, Arizona. I just saw that Yuma, Arizona is the sunniest place maybe on Earth. So I was thinking of you when I heard that little factoid. All right, so we see just a question. With Cubase 13 elements, is it possible to get the chord pads to arpeggiate? So if you're going to do like the chord pads, so I think Cubase, check to see, if you will have the chord pads here. So let me just load up a quick instrument that we could listen to. All right, so I think it was 13 that may have had this added to it. So say when we go here, we can see playing chords, and then there's patterns. And then see if you come over here, we could just say, once we select patterns, to just come over, and then you'll see like different factory presets. So we can say, okay, I want this. So I think 13 is when this was added. I'm not sure if it's limited to artist or the pro version, but if you see playing chords here, we could just switch this to do patterns, and then you could select pattern presets. I think that was incorporated in the 13 generation. Not absolutely sure if it's in elements. Another thing that you could do is just come over here. So let's say I have my chords, and then let's go to MIDI inserts, and then you could also try just going to and then you may have different arpeggiators. So that way you're just kind of taking what was a block chord and running it through an arpeggiator. And if you have Halion Sonic, another approach could be just to come over here. So let's say I'm triggering the chord pads here, and 13 elements comes with Halion Sonic, and within Halion Sonic you could also just, if we click on the MIDI tab, or let's say the edit tab, and then we go to program, you'll see this little thing that says Flex P. That's for flex phrase. We're going to activate it. And now we could just come over here, and there's all sorts of great kind of flex phrasers here. And these are different. So now when I play the chord, so this would work in elements. Says I just trigger a chord. We could have it go through different arpeggiators. And sometimes it's like, always try different arpeggiators. So let's say, okay, we want to do something, maybe not, while we're playing a keyboard sound, let's try a brass lick. So let's say I want a brass section. So now, so you could try out different arpeggiators. So you could have the arpeggiator within the instrument, within chord pads, if it's not supported in the chord pads, by going here to, pattern. You could do a MIDI insert and use the Arpeggi, or directly within the particular plugin itself. So, and this could be based on the plugin, but since you have Halion Sonic, if we just kind of come right over here, we could open up Halion Sonic, go to the edit. You want to click on the program level and then activate Flex P, which is the flex phraser, and then turn it on. And then you could have chords that are generated from triggering the sound from the chord pads themselves. All right, so we have Alex joining from Mojave, Arizona, who shows up as his username is Suop. All right, so we see Soren says, Greg, I got the real-time listening with playback processing to work in WaveLab. Thanks for your tips about the live input and session wire plug. Thanks, Greg. Now I can check my reference songs in WaveLab with room simulation. All right, glad you got it sorted out. So Cultural Dumpster Fire asks, can you score a video game with only Cubase Pro, or do you need Nuendo and its game industry specific features to have hope of making a decent soundtrack? So I would say that the game audio components in Nuendo are going to be more for kind of file interchange and sound design, not necessarily for like musical compositions. So what the Game Audio Connect would allow you to do, if you built up a sound, like let's say a sound design element, gunshots or storms or, car engines revving, guns firing away, and then you kind of edited that all together inside of Cubase, inside of Nuendo, you could then export it directly to Audio Kinetic Wise. I'm not sure if it's still under the Audio Kinetic brand or acquired by Sony a few years ago, but you could export that to Wise, and then from within Wise, if you needed to edit the source materials, you could just simply open that up back into Nuendo. So it's kind of two-way communication, but for the actual soundtrack, you could definitely do that in Cubase. Many, AAA titles are composed entirely in Cubase, and if it works for, like I just saw two of our users, were nominated for their scores for the Golden Globes. So, Hans Zimmer and Ludwig Göransson, who both do all their work in Cubase. So you could definitely do all of your musical compositions for games in Cubase. It's going to be more for kind of sound design, Foley, stuff like that, where the Game Audio Connect features of Nuendo could be beneficial. All right, so we see Mark Rabin just saying his new album drops on the 30th, Rabin 4. Apple, Spotify, Amazon, please do not buy it. I'll give it to anyone here. Vinyl is at cost. So, and Mark just says many of you are in the liner notes. That's congratulations on getting your release done. Look forward to listening to it. All right, so we see Vince is out of the studio today. He's at his parents' house. All right. Thanks for joining us while visiting your parents. All right, so we have the Invisible Men just wishing everyone peace. Neil Conway, great to see you on, is just saying cool to Mark Rabin about his album release. All right, Casey Dodson just saying hey. All right, Parabot 2 just says thanks, Greg. It's about the much appreciated. Mark Rabin just says, buddy, the cat got a mention, and Stella says woof to all. Also, Nick got credit points. Thank you, Nick. Thank you all, especially Greg and Jazz and Uno and Michael. That's very wonderful, and everyone will give a big woof to Mark Rabin's dog Stella, as Uno Memento just did. All right, we have Tony Trunzo joining from saying hi to me and the Cubase Nation. All right, so Soren says, thanks about the Zoom offer. I'll email you. You're in line with my singing coach, but I would really want to hear you out properly. I want the song as good as possible. And usual, I get the big head. I think it's best and done. Nothing is better. I need your opinion. Second opinion, I've learned. So, yeah, I'm happy to share my thoughts. So, but I haven't had a hit record myself. So. All right, so Papa Vol says, happy to be watching and listening from sunny North New Jersey. So just curious, I lived in New Jersey when I was working in studios in New York, so lived in Nutley area. So just curious what part of New Jersey you're in. But thanks for joining us. All right, so Alex is asking, can you please provide an example of entering a sentence into a short melody? I'm having trouble with Omnivocal. All right, so let's go ahead and take a quick look. So let's start a new project here. Not seeing it in my plugin list. Let me just. All right, let me just see if it's in my. Okay. So sorry, I didn't have it in my plugin collection. All right. So let's say you want to come over here. I just want to, as we. All right. So when we're kind of entering in notes, I'll just say, I'll record something. So. Okay, so now we have kind of our notes entered in, and if we want to put our text in, I'm going to select the particular word. We will come over, and then we'll have kind of a text. So let's just put in some nonsensical. I'll spell out this phonetically. All right, so I just typed in.
Club Q Cubase make music.
So just coming right over here, so the Omnivocal, so you just kind of select the particular word. Like here, I wanted music to be spread across multiple words, so I just said music, and I put 2 dashes, and then as we do this, so
Cubase make music.
So that's how you kind of do it. So just if you don't see like the text, so when you select a particular note, you'll see like the text here. And then at that point, you could just enter the text for the selected note. And if you want to hear, to adjust some of the parameters, you can say, okay, I want this to be my male singer. So come over here.
Cubase make music.
So that's how you can use Omnivocal with that. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Alex. All right, so Brian's asking, how do you change the note value of chords when dragging and dropping them onto the track? All right. So we see, all right, so let's go ahead and answer this. So the note value of chords, so let's say if we have, all right, how do you change the note value of chords when dragging and dropping them onto a track? Okay, so let's say we have let's create a quick chord track here. All right, and let's say we want to come over here. So let's say I have like these particular chords entered. I will just add a MIDI track. All right, so here we have this C major that's lasting for 2 measures. So now if I just drag these down, we can see that those chords would last a measure or until the next chord begins. So, but let's say if I again want to come here and let's put C7 followed by an F. So now this chord is there's no chord for 2 measures. Here there's 2 chords on within the bar on beats 1 and 3. So we just drag that down, and now we could just simply have that. Or if we select this particular track, we could say, let's get to our chord track, and we could just say chords to MIDI, and that would make it all into one particular event, where you see that the chord, the C major chord, is lasting 2 measures. And then, so we see 2 measures of data there. These are lasting for, for 2 beats each. And so it just kind of follows the rhythmic values. Let me know if that's kind of what you're thinking of, Brian. All right, we see Mark Raven shared some of the liner notes for his album. So congratulations! It's a huge deal getting a album released together. So it's tons of work that, in so many little things. So it's a big accomplishment. Congratulations. All right, Brian wants people to smash the like button. Okay. All right, so we have Lawrence from Barn Door Recording joining from Rhode Island. All right, so we have Philip Goff, just says thank you very much. Very helpful reply. See, Papa Vol just says, thanks, Greg, for all these sessions. They're very valuable and very appreciated. All right, so we see older versions of the key commands are in an XML file, but I see that Cubase 15 Pro, it's an SRF file. How can I implement the XML into Cubase 15? Can you show me? All right, so let's say if I go to Cubase 14, and I'll save a key command here. Okay, so we'll create empty. Let's go to our key commands here. I will save a preset. I'll call it AirFB. AirFB. Sorry if I mispronounced that. Okay, so now we come right over here. Okay, so I'm going to exit out of Cubase 14. All right, now if we want to manually copy it, I'm not sure if you're on Mac or Windows, but if we go, and we could go to the application data folder on Windows, or if you're on Mac OS, we could just go to your library. And here we'll go to our library and we'll go to Preferences. And then we'll go down to Cubase, and on Windows this will be in the application data folder. So let's say we have our Cubase 14. Let's come over to presets. So here we have our AirFB key command. So I'm going to copy that. Okay. Okay, so we copy, and then I want to go from Cubase 14 into my Cubase 15 presets. All right, and let's go ahead and paste. And we can see these are all XML files. And then let's get to the key commands. And we can see there's the key command preset that we just made in 14, copied over into 15. So, all right. All right, so Alex is asking, in Halion Sonic, I notice I can't turn off chord function on the left side of the keyboard when chord pads is turned off. How do I turn off that function? Thanks. All right, so let's go ahead and just open up an instrument track with Halion Sonic on it. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll just open up quick. Okay, so if we want to, let's say if we just bypass the pads, nothing is going to be transmitted. And let's see if we So, and these are different chord pads, so I'm not sure if, I'll just read it. So it's Halion Sonic, I can't turn off the chord function on the left of the keyboard even. All right, so it could be kind of baked into some particular instruments that would utilize it. All right, so I'm not sure if you want to get rid of it altogether. So it might be able, like one of those things that we could do in Halion, but maybe not Halion Sonic if the preset is kind of baked into the preset. So let me just try, see if we could. But let's see if we, so sometimes when we are, let me just switch this to like advanced mode here. So you can like have kind of different operating modes in the full Halion. Here in Halion, the full Halion, we could choose to, like each of these is a dockable window. So I could choose to close that particular window, but it may be fixed in Halion Sonic. So it looks like it might be fixed in Halion Sonic if the preset has those particular settings, but Halion, if you have Halion, you could that you have the option of kind of getting it at a more granular level and being able to turn off different aspects. Okay, great to see Michael Teams joining from Weatherford, Texas. It says it's a cool day in North Texas. Saying hi to myself and Cubase Nation. All right, so we see Martin, that Papaval is Martin originally from England. He first met Cubase back in the 90s. It says he's in Norwood, New Jersey. All right, the TR corner about 1.5 miles from the state line. So thanks for letting us know. Now I get to envision like where you live. It's always good. Allows me to kind of get a sense of where everyone is based. All right, Sven Isaacson says, when will we see a PDF manual for VST Live 3? Only manuals for 1.2 and version 2 are available on the Steinberg site. Let me take a quick look. I haven't looked for that. Just get a Steinberg.help. Yeah, I see just all right, so it looks kind of like maybe there's not a traditional manual. Might be more kind of like the live documentation. But I could see if I could check to see if there's plans for like a traditional PDF manual, which I always appreciate myself as well. So I'll check on that and maybe have an answer. I know I'll see the product manager for it next week at the NAMM show. But I'll see if I could get an answer for Friday's live stream on that. Sorry about that, Sven. Uno Memento has received 1 gallon of mango melon ice cream from Michael Teams. All right, so we see Papa Vol as previous beta tester. Thanks for... All right, last one, version you tested was version 4. All right. All right, the Invisible Man just says, how can I get my record button to show up on my sample track when I add it? All right, so... if we add a sampler track, so we'll come here, we'll right click, we'll add a sampler track. Okay, so if it's on this particular track, make sure if you right click, you could go to your track control settings. And we could just see the record enable. So maybe it's kind of in the hidden controls, but maybe if you come over and say, okay, we want the record enable and monitor, that we could get those to be visible controls. And you could do that for many different track types. So now when you go to your sampler track, we can just simply have the record enable and monitor button right there. The second question, my MIDI keyboard plays more than one channel at a time. How can I stop this? Well, Cubase is going to capture whatever MIDI information is coming in from your controller. So if you have like a keyboard, like a montage or something like that, and the current preset is like that's on the keyboard is a multi-timbral preset, such as we want it to play a piano and the strings and a synth all layered together. Often when you have a multi-timbral assignment on your keyboard, that when you play that patch and record it into Cubase, at that point it's going to record all of the channels because Cubase is accepting all of the channels. You can come over here and say, okay, when we go to our particular Halion track, we could say, And if we go to the routing on an instrument or MIDI track, we could set just a particular MIDI channel. So a defined MIDI channel right here. So just under the inputs, you can just say, okay, I only want to, if it's set to any input, we can say I only want to record MIDI data on channel 1. So if your keyboard is transmitting every time that you play a single note, if it's transmitting to MIDI channels 1, 2, and 3, Cubase is just going to accept that unless you specify and filter out the other channels by selecting a channel here. Previous versions I believe that came in 13, but if we go here to our track, we could go into the input transformer, and with the input transformer, we could now come over here and you'll see presets for channel filtering. So you could say we only want to pass channel 1 only, and then that would filter out all of the other tracks, all other MIDI channels. But again, Cubase is recording what your MIDI controller is transmitting. So the easiest way is to put your MIDI controller, if it's a keyboard, just put onto a simple single patch that's only transmitting on one MIDI channel. And you could test it just by, if you go to the MIDI plugin, the MIDI monitor. At this point, we could just say, you could see exactly what MIDI data is actually being transmitted. And you can see that as you hit a particular note, that particular note may just be coming right over here and be transmitted on multiple MIDI channels. So it's not a Cubase fault, it's your controller that's transmitting it. But you could easily kind of filter it out. Popavol just says it's amazing to see how Cubase has grown and developed. Yeah, I mean, I've been running it myself for 34 and a half years, almost 35 years. So it's great to see how it's grown so much. It's been a joy to watch it develop. It's like watching a child grow up. All right, great to see Beverly Beatty on. Says, hello to everyone in Club Cubase. Can you go through setting up and connecting the modulators to a VST synth? All right, so let's come over here. I'm going to disconnect one pedal I had here. Let's check my MIDI monitor, see. Okay. All right, so let's say we want to open up a synthesizer. Okay. So we'll go to an instrument track and we want to assign modulators. So let's come over here to retro log. Okay, we will just go through a particular patch. Okay, so let me just turn the volume down just a bit here. Okay, so let's say we want to modulate the cutoff of the filter. Okay, so we could draw in automation, but sometimes, you know, that could be a little tedious having to draw in that particular pattern. So what we could do is open up what's called a modulator, and a modulator is just going to kind of, you know, do particular tasks and kind of change parameters in different settings. So let's do like a simple one to start with is going to be an LFO. So we can say we want this LFO and we want to change that a parameter, let's say our cutoff, directly based on this pattern. Now, to assign this is one, I could click on the plus and we have a learn function. So I'm going to move and touch that parameter. Now that parameter has been assigned. So as I play, so let's say I want that to let's say, be whole notes instead. So, or if we want this to do a different shape. Yeah, we want it to kind of ramp up. So when we do this, and we could now choose to have this same modulation on multiple parameters. So it's like, okay, I want to adjust the resonance of this as well. So now when we play it out, and then we could say, okay, I want this resonance to start at a higher parameter, but now let's say I want to do a different type of modulation. So I want to come over here and let's just do something. Okay, and we could also have this for plugins as well. So if I want to come over here, let's add a volume plugin. So when we do this, we could just say, okay, I want to do like maybe a step modulator, and here we could draw in some different volume changes. And again, we want to assign this particular modulator to a parameter. So again, we click on the plus, and now so we could have something as simple as, or if we wanted to be more interesting, we could apply these modulators. And again, we could have this be slower. So that's how you can kind of get started with modulators, and you have kind of a whole slew of modulators to play around with. So, but basically, as we do this, so you could have shapers, macro knobs to control multiple parameters. You could morph two modulators together. So all sorts of great fun stuff that you could do with your modulators. So experiment. Get creative with sounds. If you have kind of a static sound, make it a little more interesting by utilizing a modulator. All right, great to see Sable Winters on from Bay Area. All right, Neil Conway's received 1 gallon of frozen Mystic ice cream from Michael Teams. And Sable has received 1 gallon of raspberry swirl ice cream. All right, and Tim K has received 1 gallon of tuxedo cream ice cream. Classy. All right, and Jazz Dude has received 1 gallon of amaretto chocolate ice cream. Sorry, my chat field jumped. All right, so we see Brian says what I meant was dragging and dropping from the chord pads. Okay, so let's take a look at the chord pads, how we can set it up. Let me just clear my throat. Okay, so as we're on our chord pads, let's say if we drag this over, I think by default it's going to be one measure by default. I think you could so let's see if it's based on snap value. All right, so say if we change our quantize here to half note, this may just drag it out by default to a quarter note, but you could always do sizing applies time stretch. So if we want that to last, we can now, as we play this, you could do time stretching, but I think by default it's going to be one measure as it's dragged over. And I don't think that there's a preference to change that. But let's see. So it's not really conforming to, to this snap or to the grid type here. So let's see if we switch our main grid to seconds. If it's still the same length. Yeah, so it looks like it's going to be kind of one bar by default. I could do some more research on that, Brian. All right, Brian has received 1 gallon of German chocolate cake from Michael Teams. All right, wonderful to see Gareth checking in from the Basque country of Bilbao. All right, Sergio Speed asks, hello, is it possible to open plugins with the key command on insert? So let's come over here. All right, so I will add an audio track. Let's come over here to some track presets. Let me find something with some more. All right, so let's say we want to open up insert 3 or insert 2 on this particular track. So if there is key commands for that, so if we just come over to, I think we'll say insert. So you'll see insert 2 open close. So if I just come over here, let me just assign a keyboard shortcut for that. All right, so this would open up the multi-band compressor. So when I come here, we could just assign a keyboard shortcut for that. So you'll see it again under, we go to the key commands. It'll be under the mixer, and then you'll see for all 16 inserts, there's key commands to open up each and every particular insert plugin by the number that the plugin is in. And that's one of the things I have in that with the Stream Deck profile I showed on Friday's live stream. Okay, Michael Teams granted Gareth 1 gallon of lemon meringue pie ice cream. All right, so we have Avri joining from Israel. So it's always great hearing from you. So it's great to see you on. Thanks for joining us today or this evening for you. He's received 1 gallon of chocolate marshmallow ice cream. All right. Tim K wants everyone to give the thumbs up a nice little warm mitten. Happiness is only one click away. As we see, FlyV just says in my activation manager, I have two Cubase 14s. I guess I just have to wait till 15 is released by Splice. Yeah, so, you could check with Splice to see when it's available. But I thought you mentioned on an earlier live stream that maybe you had two separate subscriptions maybe until on your rent-to-own program. All right, so we see from Alex says, thanks on Omnivocal. I thought you could paste in a text and words get parsed out to the notes automatically. So it seems like a good thing, but you may have like a multi-syllable word, and how do you want that to be pasted? So I think if you pasted it, you would probably spend more time redoing, like words that are multi-syllables than you would working, just kind of entering the notes in manually. It's pretty quick once you know what to do. All right, so we have Sizz Guy. It says, hi Greg, Cubase 15 Pro. Is there any way to select what instrument or MIDI tracks are affected by the chord track other than muting it? I want to affect some, but not all. Thanks from Boston. Okay, so let's say we have a chord track here. Now, if we want instruments to follow the chord track, so our chord track, we could put it out to a single instrument here. So if we say, okay, I only want it going out to my Halion 7, we could do that. But if we wanted to send to multiple tracks, what we could do is just use monitor tracks. And at that point, if we want the chords to be spread, we would just come over here and say, when we go to a particular track, we would say, okay, we want to just monitor the track. And then as that track is monitored, at that point, the chord track will be fed out to the tracks that are monitor enabled. So we could send it to multiple destinations. So the chord track could be sent to multiple destinations by just monitor enabling a track. And when the chord track is set to be sent out to different instruments and destinations right there. All right, so we see Omnivocal says, I can't get the word funny to fit into two notes. The NY on the second note gives me an N sound. All right, so let's see if we still have.
Cubase, make music.
All right, so maybe. All right, so let's say if I select this word and we go, let's say, to our text. So I'm just going to type in funny with a dash at the end. So try just to, so what I did is I just typed funny with a dash, and that automatically carried it over to the next note here. So if we come over. Funny. So as you can see, just like this note, funny with a dash instead of breaking apart each of the syllables, and then that would automatically spread it to the next note. All right, so we have Ralph Kalarick 4115. Is there a way to nudge like key controls, such as the background vocals, harmonies? I want to move them to be slightly offset so they don't sound in the same time on the time continuum. So yeah, we can show that. Okay, so we have kind of different nudging options here. So, and this is what our nudge factor is here. So now we could choose to, when we select a particular event, and I'll just hide the lower zone here so we can see it a little better. All right, so now we could come over here and we could choose to nudge. So, and we could do this by different time division. So right now we're nudging based on the beat. So if we come over here, we could nudge it based on the beat or based on the quantized value. So let's say I want to nudge it like a 16th note. So now when I come over here, and I think if we just hold down the control or command key plus the, plus the particular left or right arrows, that we could nudge here. Now we could also choose to, so let's say our nudge value, I want this to be eighth notes. So just control or command in the left and right arrows. Or if you want it to be like 16th notes. And if we wanted to do this for multiple events, I could come over here and I could select multiple events. Now sometimes you may want it to, and in older versions of Cubase, the kind of the grid for nudging was always tied to the grid of the main timeline. So, but now I think it was in 12 that we kind of uncoupled that. So we could say I want to nudge in seconds. So let's say I want to nudge in 10 milliseconds. So if I copied maybe a vocal and I wanted those copies to be slightly different, and if we look at our start time here, I can now nudge just by 10 milliseconds. Even though my main grid is still set to bars and beats, I could nudge in a different time format. So if I come here, let's split, I could nudge this, go down, nudge this the opposite way. And again, it's just control or command plus the left and right arrows. But you could just, if you don't see the nudge commands, they may not be on there by default, right click, and then you could just activate nudge. But the default behavior will be the default key commands, just the control or command plus the left and right. And then you could choose to unlink to the main grid. So a lot of people may want to nudge by milliseconds, but still have the grid in bars and beats when you want to get like little subtle tempo changes to make it sound not so perfect when kind of doing background vocals. So give that a try. Let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so we have Daniela checking in from Bochum, Germany with her Cubase 9 Pro. All right, and Danielle has received 1 gallon of almond praline ice cream. Seems like Michael Teams has lots of new flavors. All right, so we see from Daniela, says, Greg, can you demonstrate a bit of the Cubase goniometer with some tricks and tips Do you use any project with the goniometer? Looking for tricks and examples. Found out a lot of guys do not have any idea how to use it. So I'm not sure what a goniometer is. Let me see if I could just do a quick search here. Maybe it's, I'm not sure if it's translation. Let me just look. All right. All right, so goniometer, just looking at, I see some on sale on Amazon, an instrument that either measures an angle or allows an object to be rotated to its precise angular position. So let me know. So I'm not sure if it's a translation or if it's something else, but I'm not familiar with what a goniometer is, and maybe someone else is. They could share some insight. I'd appreciate it. All right, so we see for Alex, just as Halion 7, I tried your tweaks, but keep getting the chords playing. Seems connected to chord pad function, which even when turned off, the Halion 7 keyboard chords keep playing piano. All right, so let's give it a try here. All right, so I'm just going to go to the advanced mode and let's load up the amped electric because it has presets for the chords. All right, so now all right, let me see. Okay, so let's say if I go to my chord pads now, so if we turn off the chord pads, so let's say we turn the chord pads on, and let me just come over here. If the chord pads aren't open, they're not following, so we could turn that off. You could also choose to, we have chord pads in all MIDI inputs, but if I just choose my panorama and we close, let's say if I, have a different tab open, and these I think are really designed for, let's see if we can find the default trigger notes here. Or if these are so I think that these are independent of each other. So let me just see if like these trigger nodes. So, but the chord pads seem independent. So if you turn the chord pads off, or just simply, switch your MIDI input, or don't have that as the active window, it doesn't seem to pass the chords. Okay, so you see from Popavol, it says, is there any way to easily map a slider in a MIDI controller device, example, launch key to whatever automated control you're working with, so you can use one slider to quickly adjust whatever. Yeah, so there's a couple of different choices for that. So let's come over here to, we'll just do a quick retro log. All right, let me just. All right, so let's say I have my MIDI remote active here, so I'm gonna just come over, and we do this. We could just say I'm gonna do just a quick new mapping page. So we could have, so once it's kind of configured as a MIDI remote, I will just make a mapping page. We'll call it January 13th. Get my keyboard in the right computer. All right, so now that we have kind of actions that are defined, I could move, so I'm going to come over here and we will just right click, and I'm going to say MIDI remote, pick for remote mapping cutoff. So I do that, I move the parameter here. Or I'll just do it too. All right, so right click, MIDI remote, pick for mapping, filter cutoff, okay. Then we could move the device here. Let me see if let me just get another MIDI remote going on. MIDI fader box. See if okay. So I'm just gonna grab my MIDI fader. Here, my choice sauce controller. Don't think I have any mapping page assigned for this. All right. It's not seeing my choice sauce. Let me just see if I can go back to. Let me see if I get my, reconnect my nano control here. Okay, so right click, MIDI remote, pick for mapping. I move the parameter, apply, and then that parameter is automatically controlling that particular parameter, just like that. So again, right click on the parameter. So this is with any MIDI remote device, and then you could just map it. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, and we also see kind of, do you have to reassign it each time, or is the automated parameters in focus? So even if the window isn't in focus, I will come over, let's open up the channel settings here. So let's say the channel setting is in focus. Let me make sure I have the right fader. So you know this channel is in focus, this remote control will still control that parameter even with this being in focus. So that will be just fixed. So just right click, And that's kind of the beauty of the MIDI remote system. You can just kind of click on, I want this to control that. Then it's pretty straightforward and easy. So you don't have to reassign it every time. And then we also see from Popivol, next question, kind of on the same subject, says, I would love to have a single slider to control whatever automation lane I have in focus. Okay, so let's say I want to come over here. We could assign this fader here. So I'm going to assign this fader. All right, so we go to the mapping assistant. Now there's another mapping assistant that we could utilize. So I'm going to come over here and we could go to what we call the mouse pointer AI knob. So we open this up and I say this would just do the value. So I'm going to just click there and we apply the mapping. Now whatever I hover over, so I come here, it's going to control that parameter. If I come here, so I go to the mixer, it's going to control these particular parameters. So if I, anything that I am hovering over will automatically be controlled. So I go to my panning, I go to my volume, I go to my EQ, I want to adjust the gain or cut or the frequency. So now I hover over frequency. This one knob is controlling kind of whatever I do. I open up plugins, third-party plugins. I could just say, okay, I want to control this parameter. You just kind of hover over the particular parameters and that will control your different aspects. So again, in your MIDI remote, and it's a great way to do it. If you go to your mapping page, just assign that particular fader to mouse pointer AI knob, and then you could just come right over there and you could just apply that mapping and control whatever parameter you're hovering over. All right, so we see Bratman Studios back from taking his brother to his doctor's appointment. That's always great of you to do. He's watching on his phone at the doctor's office. All right, we see Tim Weinheimer joining from Mission Viejo, California. He's hoping that everyone's year is starting off great. All right, we have Prescott Pre joining from wishing everyone a happy new year. Great to see you on. Hope you're well. All right, Michael Teams is granted Tim Weinheimer 1 gallon of Neapolitan ice cream. And Bratman Studios received 1 gallon of lemon meringue pie. All right, so Pre is just asking, I have Nuendo 13 Icon 5-1M. Initially all worked fine, and after my then my stereo meters disappeared. I hear it's a Steinberg issue that can be fixed with a script. Can you talk about this? So I'm not sure if you have a, so if it is working under Mackie control. I think a lot of the Icon controllers work under Mackie control, but there's also scripts that work directly. So you could have a Mackie control which controls it at one level, and the Mackie control protocol is 25 years old ish now. So when you come over here, so if you go into your studio setups, I'm not sure if you're utilizing it as a Mackie control. I believe that the Icon also has MIDI remote scripts. So if you have it configured as a Mackie control, try to disconnect it as a Mackie control and utilize the remote script. So when you come over here, you could just say, let's get to the MIDI remote. And then if you have a script for that, I would use that. And within the script, there's APIs to send metering and track names and stuff like that directly to the controller as well. So you have a two-way communication. So Pre, if you can let us know if you're using Mackie control or if you are utilizing kind of the current MIDI remote script. And it's usually the companies. I think I sent out, copies of Cubase to the Icon development team so that they could, be working with their work and develop their Cubase script. And I think they have it released. All right. All right. Wonderful to see Randy Lee music on. Glad you could join us. All right, so I see from USA Roman, says Greg, just to follow up on a question I've been trying to get answered to. Let's see if it's coming later. It says, unfortunately, the chat is limited to so many characters, so I can't even get a full question in. Okay, so if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. So a lot of people, I think there's a 200 character limit in the chat. But if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to take to keep my eye out for the email. And I realize that this is probably maybe like 20 minutes behind, 15 minutes behind or so. But if you want to email me, if you have a longer question, it's always clubcubase@steinberg.de. I'd be happy to look at it for you. All right, Ruben Augusto 95. Where's the stem separation? All right, so let's come over here. So if we have like a stereo mixdown file, so let's just do a new project here. Just import an audio file. All right, so if you go to your audio menu, you'll see separate stems. And we can just come right over here. And then you can have your stems separated. And if you have, we also offer Spectral Layers 12. So you get a Spectral Layers Go version 12 with Cubase, and that could separate vocals. And there's also Spectral Layers 12 Pro, which could do, drums, bass, guitar, piano, brass, and then also background vocals from lead vocals. But that's all you have to do is just kind of select the particular file here, go to audio, and you will see separate stems. Now, if you have I think you might need to have a more contemporary Mac. So if you have an Intel-based Mac, I think it's going to need the Apple Silicon processor for the stem separation. So. All right. All right, so we have DaVinci Girl just says goniometers and oscilloscope for the stereo fields I use to exclude phasing. Says no mix and master without control of the goniometer. So we'll just kind of play this. And so it might be, I think Cubase 11 had offered the Supervision plugin. So let's say if we have this playing, let me just. All right, so we'll come over here. Let's get to Supervision. Or I'll just add a new. So let's say if you want to do like phase. All right, so you have like your phase scope here, and if you want to see more, so we have several different phase meters, and that's your panorama. All right, so let's come over here. There's also your correlation meter, and we could so you have a multi-correlation as well. And if you want to add like a stereo balance, so here you can kind of see particular frequencies. So those are popular. And if you want to see just the signal meter here, you could say. So you could have a number of different phasing meters. I haven't heard of a goniometer before, so but I think that these could give you, you know, these are very common kind of, you know, this is more signal, but these are very common phase, and this allows you to see exactly which frequencies have phase issues. And you could resize all these. So here you can see in your left, right. So a lot of those you could use. So Jazz Dude shared a link. All right, so we see from USA Roman, says when opening Cubase projects that reference plugins installed at a custom VST path that no longer exists, Cubase provides no way to see the file paths and the project is attempting to resolve. Yep, so if it, you know, I think we were discussing this over email a bit, you know, so it's the intention that VST3 plugins, while people can install them to and move them to different locations, that Cubase is always expecting to see the particular plugin in the known path. And, you know, and this is why it's kind of VST3 plugins. And while you could manually move it, that the VST3 plugins are, you know, going to, you know, why there is a known point, because this was a big problem with people with VST2 plugins, that they could, you know, delete something. So, and again, the, you know, the plugins, you know, the plugin locations aren't saved or referenced from within the project, but they're going to be kind of globally recognized by Cubase or the other DAWs, and they're going to look into kind of the, you know, the default VST, you know, we shouldn't even really call it a default VST3 plugin path. They're going to look for the correct space for the VST3 plugin. So if you are moving your plugins around your VST3 plugins, I would say it's a bad thing to do. You know, I would always suggest using the default, because, and this is kind of the reasons why, because the project isn't going to recall where your missing plugins are if you chose to move them to somewhere outside of the VST3 plugins. All right, Beverly Beatty just asked Greg, not sure what this is called. The MIDI chord, such an accord triad, get painted based on a particular scale, such as C major. If you click on a grid, the notes snap auto scale of choice. Okay, so let's say we have a chord track here. All right, and let's just come over. Okay, so let's say we have chords. Let's say, okay, we're in D major, and now we have, let's say, events. Okay, so I want to take these particular chords. We'll drag these down. Okay, so if we want to snap like our particular chords to the scale, so what we could do is we can come over and we have what we call a scale assistant. So we could say we want to use the editor scale, so we can manually set our scale here. So let's say we want this to be in D major. And if we want to snap the pitches, all we have to do is come over and we can say we want to snap pitch editing. And so now as we do this, so we have, F sharp, A, D. So if I want to move this F sharp, it's not going to move it out of the particular scale that we do right there. Now we could also choose, and I'll just maximize this, where we could look at the particular colors of notes. So now when snap pitch editing, I could only snap to notes that are within the particular scale. All right, so if I can't move this D natural to an E flat because E flat is not in the scale. So we could restrict that. Now, when we go to our color scheme, we could just also choose to colorize based on, so we'll say based on scales and chords. So if I have this turned off, I could see which notes are within a particular scale. So when I see a note like that, I can see that this note, the colors indicate that this is not within the scale. So, and then we could just go to the setup and we could see, okay, this pitch is not in the current chord or scale. We could say this pitch matches the current chord, but is not in, so we could have different colors based on conditions that the notes are based in. So, green good, kind of red means, where this orangish color is indicating that that's a note that's going to be out of the scale. But if you wanted to automatically snap it so that it's always in scale, you could just turn on snap pitch editing. And you could do that for live input. And you could also just choose to only, show the notes, show the scale note guides. So you could actually kind of see which particular notes are within the scale as well. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Beverly. All right. Reading through comments. Okay, so we see that Alex just says he solved the problem. His routing setup was routed to chord pads for some reason. Thanks. Says every problem is a learning experience. All right, so we see that Pre has it running as a Mackie control. So check to see if there is a MIDI remote script, and also make sure that when you have the Mackie control set up, so if you go to your studio menu to studio setup, that when we look at it, that you have both the inputs and outputs. So sometimes it may be transmitting, so the MIDI output, but maybe not the MIDI input that's reflecting the meters and other data. Check to see that that is connected to the correct MIDI port for communication for the device. All right, so we see Alex just says also, thanks for the Omnivocal solution. Your channel is invaluable. Thanks. All right, reading through comments. All right, so we see Paul Claridge. Great to see you on. So, Greg, I have a project that was done at 48K, and I want to use different audio interface to add extra guitar parts. My Bosch GT100, can I quickly convert the file to 44.1 somehow? So if you have a file that you want to quickly convert from 48K to 44.1, or let's say the opposite, just open up my standard sample rate conversion project here. All right, so say we have, and this project is at 44.1. So we select, and we can see that our record format's 44.1 16-bit. All right, so the easiest way I found to do, to convert a project sample rate, is just go to your project menu to project setup. And here we can see my sample rate. I'm going to switch it. In your case, you go from 48K to 44.1. I'm going to do the opposite and go from 44.1 to 48K. I hit OK. All right, and we'll say convert audio to the new rate. So I'll convert. And it says, do you want to keep the source files in the pool directory? So why not? I'm not hard up. I have hard disk space, so I'll keep those. It says, do you want to keep audio events at their sample position? Here we're going to choose no. And now when we play back, all the files are now 48K, and we listen to it. It's the same pitch. So now your project's at 44.1. So, if you have to switch the sample rate, that's a pretty easy way of doing it. If you have tracks that are in musical mode, you may get a message saying, these tracks are in musical mode. Do you want to, write the files, to render the files before doing the sample rate? And you would say yes. But at the sample position, we want to choose no there. And then your project's at the new sample rate. Great to see you on, Paul. Hope you're well. All right, so Hood Known saying hello to everyone. Great, sorry, my chat field jumped. All right. All right, so we see Mark Brugler says, hi, looks like chat commenting failed on my Android, testing on PC. We'll resubmit question if it works here. So that seemed to work. All right, so Hood Known 5875 asks, I have a problem when I cut the bar, the first MIDI note in the bar is deleted. Okay, so let's say if we have a MIDI track here. All right, so this often happens, let's say if we have MIDI events. All right, so I come here, let's say I have a note. Sometimes MIDI notes may start just ever so slightly ahead of the beat. So if I come here, we can say, okay, got all these notes. All right, so, and I'll move all these notes to a different bar. Okay, so let's say I want to cut here. Okay, so let's say I cut, and we can see it's like, oh, what happened? All right, so often when we go to cut, if there's a note that is overlapping, so we can see that this note, when we split, we could change that behavior. So, and it's a preference. So let's go over to your preferences, to settings. And what you want to do is going to be under, probably, I think under editing MIDI, to split MIDI events. So when that is disabled, I come over here. And now when I split this event, that note disappears because that event wasn't actually in that particular, so that event wasn't, in that particular phrase. So let me just, so try just to come over here, and when you have a note that's slightly overlapping, go to the preference, under editing MIDI, to split MIDI events. So then when I cut the particular event here, that note that started earlier, when I go to cut, will actually kind of just be at that same position. So that way it splits the note right there in that note where you do the cut. If it's slightly if it's slightly before the beat, that will just cut the particular MIDI event. And then if we just choose to delete that, then we have that cut right at that particular measure. So try going to your preferences or settings, editing MIDI, split MIDI events. And I think that would enable that preference, and I think you'll be all set. All right, so we see Hood Known just says, or Neil Conway says, I keep finding Cubase has many / most of the plugins that I've gotten separately over time. So we've been doing plugins, longer than almost any company. Maybe Waves was, I remember like the first Steinberg plugins coming in 1995. So we've been doing it, and obviously we invented VST. So as a company. All right, Mark Brugler says, when I open the symphony orchestra template with Iconica, I get a cluster of notes playing like a horn stab on every track. What could cause this? I'm on Windows, Cubase 14 Pro. Thanks. Let me see if my templates have shown up. Just go to my hub. Yeah, so I wonder if it's kind of, if it's maybe a performance issue. Let us know if your computer is kind of working as expected. I don't have that particular template on my system. Don't think I have. I may have to update my templates. But usually with that kind of behavior, I would think, see what happens if you increase your buffer size. Because I think that loads a separate instance of Halion for each. So the CPU distribution should work well to distribute across multiple CPU cores. But check to see if you raise your buffers, and also see if when you play, see if you don't have make sure you don't have any like arpeggiators open or keyboard controllers that are transmitting arpeggios. That could also kind of cause what you describe. So, but I know I've run it before. I'll see if I can get all the templates restored for Friday's live stream. I'll make a note to do that. But it seems like it should, maybe if other people could try it real quick and see if they have any issues. All right, so we see for Alex is Halion 7 multi-instrument. I want to apply our Apache arpeggiator on the piano left side of the keyboard while playing channel 2 piano on the right split side with the arp off. So one instrument on a split keyboard. Okay, so let's just do a quick new project. Okay, so let's say we want to have, we'll just go to advanced. So let's say I want like an etude piano. Okay, so let's see. I want piano on the left side of the keyboard while playing on channel 2 the piano on split right side with the arp off, so one instrument on a split keyboard. All right, so let's say I want to, now let's do like an organ. We'll do maybe studio strings here. Just okay, so I have my organ, my piano here, and let's say now I have my strings on, and I have these on MIDI channel 1 and 2 currently. So I'm going to go to like the MIDI here and say, okay, we want these to both be on MIDI channel 1. Okay, so now okay, and so you want the piano on the left side while playing channel 2 piano on the right side. Okay. Okay, so it sounds like, I'm sorry, maybe you want just the arpeggio on the left-hand side of the piano keyboard. Okay, so I'll just load up the same keyboard here. Let me just go back to Etude. We'll say our intimate atmospheres. All right, so let's say we want to have this, and we're going to set our range here. So now we'll have both these. So these will split. So as we play, so I have 2 different instances loaded up. Now, I'm not sure if you need to use the arpeggio, but let's say if we come over to edit, let's say our MIDI mod and go to the flex phraser. Here we could just say, okay, I want this to be a simple classic arp. So now okay, but we want, let's say, the arpeggiator on instrument 1. So I'm going to come over here, go to the MIDI mod. All right. So we should have that. Let me just all right, I'll just put it on this one and we could switch. So I'm going to okay, so I have my left hand here, and we'll go to our flex phraser here, activate it. Right, and I'll just go to like my MIDI control here, and I'll just swipe these 2. So now my left hand is doing arpeggios. My right hand isn't. So let me know if that would work for you, or if you specifically need to do the arpeggio. But you could just, again, go to the MIDI, and then you want to, we go to edit to the MIDI modulators, and then you could just come right over here and just have those 2 sounds. So the same instrument on the same MIDI channel, but we have 2 instances, and this one is going to be running the arpeggiator, this one isn't. So let me know if that's good for you. All right, seeing Danielle's comments about the goniometer. I'll do some more research on it. All right, so we see from Beverly Beatty says fantastic. Thanks, Greg. Perfect. All right. All right, so we see from DJ Eric Fox, hello Greg, can you explain how to map a new MIDI keyboard, no script for it, with Map Assistant to be able to use quick controls and transport buttons? So let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, so let's say if I want to go to my MIDI remote. So I think I may have my Nectar. All right. So let's say I want to set up a new MIDI remote. All right. So I think I'll just start from scratch. So we'll add vendor. We'll call it Nectar here. Okay. And we'll give it a name. Whatever the name of your MIDI remote is. We're going to select our in and output ports. Okay, now we're going to create the MIDI control surface. So let's say on my Nectar I have different faders. I'm going to undo that. So let me just... All right, so I say I have 8 faders here. So I'm going to basically replicate. I move the fader, and that's captured. All right, now I want to have buttons. So let's say, okay, I want my button, and we'll do this as transport. So I will come over here. So we could basically just kind of lay out visually what are, and then I'm just hitting the buttons on my controller. Okay. Now I also have some knobs. So let's go over here to knobs, and I want to put my knobs here. So as I move the knob, the object gets populated. Okay, so now these knobs are offset. So now I move kind of the bottom knobs. Okay, so I kind of have my mapping, like these are the physical controls that are on my controller. So let's say I want to assign these for particular functions. So we would go to what we call the mapping assistant. So as we open the mapping assistant, I could hit the button and say, okay, that's going to be play. So we could go to our transport here and say, okay, I want this to start. Okay, so, and then we click apply mapping. Now I could also let's say I want this to be my next button to be record. So I could right click on the parameter and say MIDI remote mapping pickup. And then I could just say, okay, I want it. And then I hit the button on a controller and click apply mapping. Now I have play, record, mapped. Okay, I want to do stop. So I see my stop button. So I'm going to right click, MIDI remote mapping, hit the button on my controller. That is stop. Apply the mapping. Now I want these 8 knobs to do quick controls. So again, I could come right over here. Let's say I move the knob. I go to my focus quick controls, and I could just double click, move knob 2, double click on quick control 2, move knob 3, double click, and we could assign our MIDI remote just like that. So I've assigned my transport and my MIDI remote. So now as I go to open up plugins, let's say we do a Halion track, I could come right over here. Let's do a single instrument. We load this up. We have our 8 quick controls that we could see. So now these are automatically controlling different parameters. If I want to open up a particular plugin, I could have these 8 controls automatically. My quick controls automatically adjust the parameters based on that particular plugin. So as I adjust the knobs, those parameters are adjusted right there. So it doesn't have to look super pretty. You can make it look pretty, but basically we make a software representation of the physical controllers on your controller that you want to map, and then use the mapping assistant to assign those particular parameters either by right-clicking on the parameter. So you're like, okay, I want this fader. I want to come here, MIDI remote mapping. I want this fader to control my control room volume. Apply the mapping, and now that fader is controlling that parameter. So once you kind of build what the physical controller looks like and the knobs that you want to use for control, then you could just assign it, and you could have multiple pages of assignments as well. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right. All right, reading through comments here. All right, so we have from Papavol says, in control room, I realized yesterday that the listen dim level to set the main section, even though I use the phone section for my normal work. Any reason why the settings in main? So it might work. Let's take a quick look. So if you're not familiar with the listen dim, we'll come over. Let's just get all right, so let's say we have. All right, so when we want to deal with the listen dim in the control room, so if we come over, so those that aren't familiar with like the listen function, this is always a cool function. So when we come over, you know, we could, let me just put another track, or I'll just load up a different project here to show this. All right, so say we have our control room. All right, so generally like when we solo a track, So let's say we come here to the bass track. All the other tracks are muted. But now if we come over here, there's also a listen button. So when I do the listen, just come here. And then we could do what we call listen dim. All right, so when I hit listen now, let's say on the correct track, we could just simply dim the other tracks. So they don't necessarily mute, but they can diminish in level. So we could listen to it kind of in context. All right, now when we have our phones channel, and we see our listen dim, let's go ahead and I'm going to change the routing to my phones channel. So I'll say from my first monitor, let's get to my phones now. And I have the listen dim set. So you can see it doesn't have so it's not necessarily a dim in the phones, but let's see if we change. So, and I think a lot of times, it could be like the design intention of the phones is like an alternate mixdown path. Now, one preference that might have an impact on this, let's see if we come over to our control room and we say we're going to use the phones as the main preview channel. Let's see if that has any impact. So here is almost kind of doing like how much we boost the listen, but no listen dim. So if we come here, it may not be a dim, but you could boost. So, but it seems like could be a dim there. I'm not sure with the exact reasoning. Maybe the intention is for kind of previewing as opposed to mixing through there, as a lot of people would use the main headphone out of their audio interface and you still have the dim control, but the phone's channel is like kind of set up so like an assistant could be monitoring at different different sources than what the engineer or artist are hearing. So all right, so we see from Hood Known 5875 says, but when I quantize MIDI, it should be on the grid, and this is with our split. So it could also depend on, let's say if we have MIDI notes here. All right, so let's say if I have a particular MIDI note, depending on your quantize setting. So if we go to your quantize panel, if you have soft quantize turned on, so let's say, okay, I want to quantize this to eighth notes, and I do this, the soft quantize will still kind of quantize it and always continue to move it. So it doesn't actually move it to the beat. So it'll move it closer to the beat. So make sure that you don't have this soft quantize. So when I do this, I apply quantize. That will go exactly there. If I have my soft quantize on, it will move it based upon my percentage. So you say it'll move it 60% closer to the beat every time, but not actually get to on the beat. So if you have soft quantize enabled, then it would still cause that problem. So make sure you don't have soft quantize turned on. See, Sabertooth Bicycle says there's equivalent of millions of dollars worth of studio equipment, skillfully distilled down into the features of plugins included in Cubase. It's amazing to have such capabilities available to us. Yeah, it's great to see. I remember working in a huge studio, and I, as a second assistant, I was the guy that had to do the recalls on the SSL, like G series computers, E console with G computer, where you had to literally match every knob on the SSL to the snapshot and go through every piece of outboard equipment with, paper writings of what the settings were to do a mix recall. It always sucked. So it could take 3 or 4 hours to do a recall of a mix. All right, wonderful to see Michael Marshall on from Somerset, UK. Okay, see more discussion of the goniometer. I'll do some more research on that. All right, so we see from Alex is thanks for the split. It works with Apache, but the Flex Razor, for some reason, I can't see the edit function in Halion 7 nor under the menu bar, select menu, thanks. All right, so in Halion 7, so, it could be, let's take a look at the instrument here. So let's go ahead. So it might be slightly different per instrument. So let's say if I want to come over here to, we'll just load up a different instrument. So let's say I don't have that one license. Let me just don't have that license either. All right, let's do a hypnotic dance. All right, so let's say. So it might be when you come over here, you might. So sometimes some of the instruments in Halion can be kind of pre-configured, but if you click on the plus, you could come over and like what you see within the edit. So you could say, okay, here I want to see an edit page. I want to see a library. I want to see a keyboard. I don't want to see, other elements. So we could kind of pick and choose, different functions. And let me just. So then, you want to, once you're in, you have edit there, you could go to, and if you want to make sure that one, you're probably not in the macro page, so the macro page. So go to the edit page and then to MIDI mod, and then you need to activate the Flex Razor from there. So, and then you could see like your different MIDI modules. And then you could have all sorts of fun there. All right, so we see Space Babies, as I was just watching earlier, vids for Cubase 13. Just happened to catch this live stream. Very cool. So, yeah, so we usually do this every Tuesday and Friday. You see Space Baby 1174 does his live channel, does his channel live stream often. So yeah, usually Tuesdays and Fridays. We're not going to do it next week because of the NAMM show. So I'll be busy with the NAMM show. But we've had probably 530-ish live streams. So, and they're all annotated with timestamp comments. You can go to cubaseindex.com and search. All right, so we see Balsa joining from Montenegro. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we see Space Baby 1174 subscribed and liked. All right, so we see Hood Known 5875 says, gratitude, Greg. I thought it might be soft quantized now. I understand now. I love soft quantized, leaves a bit of the human feel. So yeah, just be aware that, as you do that, some of the, the start of the note, the intention is always moves like 60% closer to the beat. But once you turn that soft quantize off, or you just turn that preference on, then when you cut, then it will cut the event and split the note. And so if you erase the previous event that has like maybe just the very tail end of the note, you can clean it up pretty easily. So, but once you have that preference, I think it'll. All right. All right, so we see Danielle just mentioned her Fairlight cannot be updated to VST2, and Steinberg will let VST2 die, and I ignored to buy. So again, VST2, kind of stopped development in 2008. So it's now a VST3 plugin is legal and can vote, at least in the United States. So. All right, so we had a couple questions that were mailed in. Let me get to those. A couple processing. All right, so I think it was Michael Marshall asked this. Says, what changes were made in the latest version of VST Connect? All right, so, and with this, when you go to your VST Cloud and we go to VST Connect. All right, so as we work with this, so it used to be that and the only difference is, in the latest version, it came out in October, was that previous versions you could, contact someone and start a session with someone based on their My Steinberg account name. And now when we do it, and there's always the option to not use the My Steinberg account name and just to use kind of the key, which is just a series of numbers. And for kind of data privacy rules, we went from not using the My Steinberg account credentials as the login, and we just now use just only the key. So the latest version, nothing has really changed in VST Connect itself, but it has changed to make sure that you just utilize the key, since using the My Steinberg doesn't work anymore for kind of data privacy issues. So that was the only change with it. All right. And the next point we had on, and I think I may have misunderstood on the last live stream, was can I see chords when writing in the MIDI editor? And I think I showed that you could see the chord track, but maybe let me just open up a different project to show this. All right, so I'm going to create a chord track based from the audio file itself. And let's say we want to write in some MIDI data. So I'll just do a new track version here. All right, so when we change our colors from, let's say, scale and chords from velocity, and let's say we want to use the chord track here. So we can visualize and see the chord track right above here. So now as we go to write notes in, let's say, okay, we have a D major chord, and I put a C note in. All right, now as I move, let's say I put an A note, so an A is within the chord. So we see that this is a green note. Let's put a G note in. So G is within the scale. So we'll come here, let's put a G note in. So we can see that, this particular note is within the scale. So we could come over here, and as we move, we know that chords. So let's come over here and say, so we could look at notes that are within the particular, scale that we want. So I think our scale here is A major. So we can see that, this note is falling within the key. These notes are within the scale. This note is out of key. And to get in, so as you're writing notes in, you get a sense of exactly how that note is going to relate harmonically based on the color of this. And if you want to see kind of what the different color schemes are as we do this, we could just go to your setup here, and again you'll get a description, and you could change the colors to, so if you want like this color to always be like very red, so let's say red bad, green good. So we could now come over, and as we have notes that are very red, we know that red notes are out of key, out of the chord, out of key, and that the notes that are green are within the particular chord, and these notes, this shade of green, is within the key. So as we write notes in, you could be very aware of and see visually. So, and again, if you go to the color scheme, the default color scheme is going to be velocity. We want to just switch this to scales and chords, and then you could colorize based on and see the colors reflected based on its harmonic relationship, and that could be based on the chord track or utilizing the editor scale. So when we used a chord track, that's when we could differentiate if it's within the chord or out of the chord, but within the key. All right, so let's jump back to live questions. Again, questions can always be sent in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Great. Okay, so we see Space Baby 1174 is ripping audio from a video possible. Yeah, so it'll, when you import a video file into Cubase, I'll just do a new project. It will, when importing a video file, it will automatically extract the audio. So let's say if I come here, let's import a video file. So we do that, the audio is automatically extracted. We could also just come over and say we want to do a file menu, and we'll import audio from a video file. So I could select the video here, and now the audio from that video file is automatically imported. So no problem. All right, so we see from DaVinci Girl, I'm not sure if this is about VST3, it says set it to just a development kit to open source, no reason not to do this. So VST3 is open source already, so if you weren't aware of that, it is open source under, I think, the MIT library. So anyone could, there's no excuse for anyone to not develop VST plugins. You don't have, there's no financial consequences at all. So VST3 is open source. So just in case you weren't aware, Daniela. All right, great to see Jeff Zabelski on from Chico, California. Is Smasher number 69. And he's gotten 1 gallon of Dreamsicle ice cream for his dulcet tones. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, so reading through comments here. You see some 2001 references there. All right, so Neil Conway just says, great stream, missed you guys. It's great to have you back. So Bratman Studio says, have you learned any more about how you'll be set up for NAMM? And will you be able to demo or what under this social media room? So I think I could have, I'm still, like, I was supposed to have a meeting yesterday, but the person I was having a meeting with was sick. But I think I might be able to have like one person in as an appointment, but I still haven't gotten it verified. It's kind of a new thing, like the it's like a creators lounge or content creators lounge. But I will hopefully have answers for Friday that I can announce. But if anyone is going to the NAMM show and wants to meet up, let me know. We could figure out a place to get together, grab a coffee with people that are on the live stream. It'd be great to see Rick, and I know that Tim Weinheimer's come out to the show before. I didn't think I saw him last year, but I saw Rick last year, so it'd be great to see other people. So we see Beverly Beatty. Does Cubase 15 have a wavetable VST synth like Vital or Serum? So there's lots, I think within Halion Sonic, I believe, and the standard with Cubase, like Flux, I think. I believe this is standard. So here you can come over and just say, okay, we want to so don't sleep on some of like the included synths if you want. And within Halion, there are other wavetable synthesizers. So play around with that one, Beverly. I think that is standard with Cubase as part of Halion Sonic. All right. Right, Jeff Sabowski just says, hi Greg and thanks. When do you think we all stopped using VSTI as an instrument? Like, when do I think we will actually stop using VST instruments or using VSTI as a name for instruments? So I think VST instruments will be used probably longer than hardware synthesizers in a few years. So. All right, so we see from Alex says Halion 7 using Eagle, feeling right plugin, no edit function. All right, so let's take a look at Eagle. So, some of them are, so let's go. So here you could have. All right, so you could adjust dynamics here. So if you want it to be everything to be very bright. And some of the times what you could do is with some of the instruments, so let's say when I come over here, you could, so a lot of these will be, might have built-in processing. So you get to say, okay, let's go to the program level. And sometimes you could, these will, some instruments will allow you to kind of see what's under the hood a little more. So let's say if we, want to come over, right, so we have that. So we have our insert effects, so you could have different effects processing. But sometimes, like, you may not have as much, if it's not doing switches, if it's a sample-based instrument, you may have more effects processing than being able to edit parameters in a particular synthesizer. So it's ignore in the paid program pan drum. Let me see if I have pan drum installed or not. Yeah, I don't have the license for that. But, some of them are, if it's more of a sample based, some of them may not allow you to edit as much as when you're doing more synthesis functionality between them. So, because it's just kind of working with, various samples. See, Jeff Sabelski says in VSTI in Webster's Dictionary shows Halion. I'll have to check that out. See, Jazz Dude just saying never underestimate any Cubase synth. So, yeah. All right. Beverly Beatties just says Jazz Dude is a fella here, and she's in the burbs of Vancouver, Canada. Has a DeLorean car kitted out as the Back to the Future car. So it's 95% the same with a flux capacitor. That's cool. I have one of the Zed's guys, one of his teams on one of the crew of Zed is a DeLorean guy. So you see how I go to Zed's house and you see all these Teslas and a DeLorean. So it's always interesting. All right, we see Peter joining. Pre's asking, Greg, can you show us the path to using a patch script for older synths? So I think if we come over to, if we have a preset name, what you could do, if you have a list, so let's come over here. We'll go, and this will be in your application data folder under Steinberg Cubase on Windows. As I think your Windows, if I remember right, because you had the little keyboard synth workstation, I remember, if memory serves me right. But let's come over here. I'm going to hold down the Option key and go to Library. And when we go to Presets, so we go to Preferences, let's say Cubase 15. And then under presets, I think we'll see a patch name scripts. Let me see if it's in here. Okay, it's going to be in the scripts folder. And then you can see patch names. So you can see inactive ones. So you could drop it into this folder, and then when you go to add a particular instrument, so let's say if we go to our studio setup, and here, we'll go to our device port setup, or MIDI device manager, sorry. When you go to install device, then you would see it in this particular list. So let's say, okay, I got a Chord Triton, and I hit OK. I assign it to a particular MIDI port. So let's say, okay, I want it going out there. So let's say for our Triton. So we'll give it our MIDI port where it's connected to. All right. So now when we come over here, we could add a MIDI track. And so we'll just say, okay, we want this going to our Triton. We'll hit add track. And then if you have a patch name script that you've loaded in that folder, we go to this particular MIDI track. Then let's see if it's under routing. Then you can see kind of all the patch name scripts from the Triton and be able to select all the sounds of your Triton right there. Okay. See that Peter has received 1 gallon of Millennium Crunch ice cream. All right, so Bratman Studios says I was using the L button and changed channels and couldn't play my keys on another channel. What was wrong? Well, I left the L button in on the drum track and threw me until I realized the mistake. Yeah, that could happen. All right, so we see from Alex says, I saw in your Eagle plugin for Halion 7, you have an edit function, which I don't have in order to access Flex Phraser. So if you're, let's see if it's still, let me add the track again. We'll just add Halion 7. So maybe if you go to the advanced, and then load it up. So let's say we want to go to Eagle. All right, and then go to MIDI modulation there. So try, going from like when you're starting from an advanced, and then you could just kind of come over and load up your arpeggiations. So let's say, okay, I want to go to piano. So, but yeah, so try starting from an advanced and see if that makes a difference. So Bratman Studio says saw Fender's branded Studio One looks suspiciously like Cubase, huh? So I think maybe we'll see if it seems like maybe the PreSonus brand might be going away and just might be branded under Fender, as Fender bought PreSonus a number of years ago, or like 3 or 4 years ago. So kind of heard that it was going to be happening. So we'll see if the PreSonus brand survives. I hope it does. A lot of people worked hard to build that brand up. So hopefully not every PreSonus product, or I hope that people have built it up are okay with if it's a rebranding. So. All right. Okay, Jazzy Lamel says, greetings, Greg. I'm having issues with Cubase. I play a song, certain audio tracks drop out, and then it comes back in. Also, when I do a bounce, it does the same thing in the bounce mix. Not sure why. So I had someone I was helping with their Cubase not too long ago was running into this, where it's like all of a sudden tracks are just appearing and turning off, and I go to export and this just stops playing. And then what we determined was happening is they would be kind of working on stuff. So let's say they were working on a project and they were kind of automating, like they had the track in automation. So we were coming over here and let's say they were working on a bass part. So they would come over here and say, okay, what does it sound like when we, mute the bass? So we'll come over and say, okay. So as we come over, okay, let's, we want to mute the particular bass part here. So and then, okay, we're going to find kind of like the right EQ frequencies. So, and what they were doing is kind of automating all of these, like as they were searching for the sounds, as they were muting, everything was automated, the entire process. So while they're looking for the EQ, all these changes as they were kind of searching for the frequencies were automated. So look in like the automation lanes and just make sure that there's no, kind of unexpected automation. So a lot of people, could be writing automation when they don't realize it. So as we kind of come over here, we say, it's like, oh, that's where the frequency sounds good. And they rewind, and it's like, as they're playing, they're basically recorded all of their searching for the sounds. Now, if you go to the automation parameters here, so if you get an automation panel rather, so you get a project to automation panel, you could say, I only want to write volume automation. I don't want to write anything else. So you could say, I could basically suspend writing all these automations, but make sure, because the same exact thing with this customer, and they just automated a whole lot of different parameter changes, and they thought that they were just adjusting the parameters, and then they had tons and tons of unexpected automation that was affecting their project, and parts were cutting in and out. Okay, Beverly Beatty says, Greg, I have a question about the stereo out volume. What number in the VU meters is the maximum volume pre-mastered? Should it be? I know about not clipping in red, but what is the magic number? So there is no real particular number, but people are always trying to, get, we'll call it get an edge. So, and it could depend on if you're sending the project to someone to be mastered or if you're doing all of the work yourself. So some people will say, I want my mix to be as good as possible. And, and it could also depend upon the particular delivery service. So, writing for vinyl would be different levels than for CD, than Spotify and Amazon and iTunes or Apple Music. YouTube could all have different optimum levels. Like, I have some friends that and they'll never share their numbers, and they're like, I figured out what the magic value is for Spotify. Or I figured out and it's different than YouTube. And, YouTube is different than Amazon, and Amazon's different than Apple. And I would use a different number for my CD master. So each service could have a kind of a known value. So and one of the things you could do is let's say we just do a quick audio export here. So I'll just say, okay, we'll just do a quick audio export here. And let's say I wasn't I didn't spend a lot of time on my particular mix. So I'm just going to drag in my mix here. So let's say, okay, I have my mix. And what you could do on the final mix stage is actually come over here, because a lot of times it's different streaming services. A lot of people would go for minus 14 LUFS, loudness units. But if you just come over here to the processes, go to normalize, and then you could say, okay, I'm going to select that particular file, and you can say, okay, I want to normalize by loudness. So if I was doing something that's going to be broadcast on TV, if I was mixing a TV show, I'd probably want minus 23 LUFS. If I'm doing streaming service, I probably want minus 14 LUFS. And then you could just process that particular file to that known level. So, you don't have to necessarily go crazy with this, because a lot of people may just kind of boost it or cut it after the mix has been done. So if you were doing, sending it to a mastering engineer, I would try to leave minus 6 dB of headroom, and you could communicate with your mastering engineer and just say, what can I do to make your job easier? And it's a good kind of business skill. It's what can I do so I'm not messing you up? What would be the ideal, because they may have specialized tools, okay, I could get that extra gain from my tools or my method. So some people, if you're using a mastering engineer, they may, set up their project to do that. If you're doing it all yourself, then, try to aim for, and again, depending on a delivery, and if someone has to turn it up a little bit, it's not the end of the world. Many great classic recordings, people turn up the volume and are happy to do it because they have an emotional reaction to the song. So. All right, wonderful to see Gerald Elion. And his question is, in what situation would you use a dynamic EQ and how? So a lot of times when we have, let's see if we could put one on here. Okay, so, what a dynamic EQ is going to do is to take, a specified, so we could kind of select a particular frequency range. So generally, if we have a multi-band EQ, if we have a multi-band compressor, so let's say we have this song going on. Let me just revert it to its original values here. All right, so we'll go to, let's say in our master fader here, just for demonstration purposes. If we come over to a multi-band compressor, all right, so we could basically come over here and say, okay, we want, so let's say we'll do so here we could take different frequency ranges and we could apply different amounts of compression, but it's going to be kind of this whole frequency spectrum. Now when we want to do a little more precise that's when we could use a dynamic EQ. So let's say frequency, and let's come over here and I'll just make this a little larger. Okay, so now when I come over, we can say, okay, we want to do compression. Let's say on this particular, we'll find, and sometimes when you hear plugins, they're kind of like, oh, this is a smooths out a particular frequency range or suppression. So let's say I want to take this particular frequency, and then we could apply dynamics. So when we look at this, we'll say, okay, let's come over here, and we'll say, okay, EQ band 5. And now we could say, okay, we want, so let's say we want the kick drum, every time the kick drum comes in, to compress those particular frequencies. So we could have kind of a more, if we wanted to adjust our Q to be more narrow as opposed to kind of the whole frequency spectrum. So we'll say, so now we could just have the kick drum frequencies compressed. And you could also take another source and say, okay, every time the kick drum comes in, apply dynamic compression on the bass so that when the kick drum is hitting, I don't want the bass to be in that frequency or the low frequencies of a piano. So that those low frequencies are being compressed as soon as that kick drum is coming in to kind of give it a little more space. So that's when people would use a dynamic EQ. Okay. Let's see, Peter has been running Cubase since 1996. All right, so Soren says, Greg, when I record a reference song with loopback of UR22C, sometimes songs recorded in Cubase with red input signal, overshooting 0, right? How can songs from Amazon Music get red on input signal? Sometimes, like some of the streaming processes, like when you're doing it, are compressing it, and sometimes you may be adding gain when you're doing a loopback. So it may not be the same exact gain structure. So, with your loopback, you could still add or attenuate gain as well on the input channel. And sometimes, people will push the envelope to get a louder signal, and there could be errors in the particular signal, and they don't mind because it gives them, some people will feel that it gives them kind of the edge. So it's like, oh, someone's not going to hear, on their phone or streaming over Bluetooth all the subtleties, and if there's imperfections with some digital audio errors. All right, great to see John Costigan on. Let's see, Beverly Beatty just says, thanks for the overview. You're welcome. And John has received 1 gallon of butter pecan ice cream. All right. And Soren's received 1 gallon of peach mango supreme ice cream. All right, so I think I'm at the end of questions. We'll see if there's more questions that kind of pop in. Give it a couple minutes. So once again, we won't be having live streams next week because of the NAMM show. And if people are going to the NAMM show and want to meet up, it'd be wonderful. Just feel free to reach out to Club Cubase at steinberg.de and be happy to meet up somewhere. It'd be great to meet people from the live streams. All right, Randy Lee's just saying he's back from his doctor's visit. So thanks for joining. Hope your appointment went well. So Bratman Studio just says, Greg, other than memory, is there a limit to the number of, say, retro synths you could use at a time? Eventually you can, run into, like CPU overload, depending how many voices you had. And I remember like when I think a lot of people had migrated when we showed, I did a joint live stream. We did kind of like 2 hours on a Club Cubase, and we did an hour with Yamaha synth guys, and I showed kind of the montage plugin, which is the ESP plugin, and we were able, and I just kind of loaded up like a demo project with like 8 voices and kept loading up additional instances, and I think I got up to like 1,080 voices going on with the montage plugin, which is kind of a heavy, pretty intensive plugin. So there's lots of voices that you could do. So, and some of the synths, may not utilize memory as much as like synthesizers often, it's going to use a bit of memory for overhead, but a lot of synthesizers will be using more of the processor as opposed to memory. So large sample instruments may be utilizing more memory than CPU and hard disk than the CPU for the processing. So depending on the instrument itself, it may, one instrument type like orchestral sample libraries would be more taxing on your hard disk and memory, and synthesizers may be less taxing on hard disks and memory and more on audio processing. Okay. Let's see, Michael Teams was inspired by his Caribbean vacation for new ice cream flavors. See, Jeff Sabelsky says NAMM was cool to attend once for me. Let's see, Tim K says, I hope you're not next to the drums again. So I don't think that they're going to have all the acoustic drums out this year at the Yamaha booth, but we'll see. All right, so Jazzy Lamel says, hey, Greg, I'm not using any automation at all. Just randomly drops out on certain tracks. Can't figure it out. Yeah, check, I see Jazzy just mentioned, using latency monitor to make sure that, there's no like hardware components that need to be optimized. So if you're on Windows, it's a great tool that could isolate and kind of point out different different hardware components that may be interrupting your audio performance. So, if you want to share a project with me, sometimes if you have a project and you have 15 plugins loaded on one track, or if you have an instrument that is a single instrument, most instruments, if you're stacking different instruments together, like in a multi-timbral instance of Halion, for example, if we load up most instruments that are kind of multi-timbral in nature, if you load this up and you load it with 64 different instruments, there's only like certain aspects that can, that could use multiple CPU cores. So just be aware that some instruments, like if you load up multiple instruments within a single instance, that single instance can only utilize one CPU core. Halion is smart in that it could actually utilize multiple CPU cores, but if you have one audio track that has, 15 plugins on it, like that one track could be like really taxing your audio performance load, because that one track can only talk to one processor. Every DAW kind of works the same way because it's all going to be serial in nature. So, check how your processing is allocated, and if you have, like lots of, plugins on one track, that could be causing the issue as well. Okay. All right, so see if there's any others. Questions. Let me see. Jeff Sabelski, the people liked his oboe reeds at NAMM. It's a whole part of the show I usually don't get to hang out in. All right, I'll give it another minute or so. And let me see, Tim K is just saying I use the Steinberg Library Manager to move all of my default storage to my external SSD, and I've freed up a lot of space on the C drive. And that sped up things a lot for him. So, and we see Jeff Sabelski is also mentioning his GPU and motherboard have sound needing to disable the drivers. Yeah, so like the latency monitor would probably be able to find a lot of those types of issues. All right, see if there's any other questions that sneak in. I'll give it another 15 or 20 seconds. All right, so we see George says, enjoy NAMM. So it's always a lot of work, but I'm looking forward to seeing my Steinberg colleagues from Hamburg and some other friends from Hamburg. So NAMM's always a great social thing. So many friends I get to see at NAMM, and some friends that live close to me that I only see at the NAMM show, ironically. It's like, oh, we should get lunch. We only live 10 miles apart, so. But we get lunch at NAMM. So, all right, it looks like we are out of questions. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. We'll be back on Friday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. So if you have questions you want to send in advance, please send them to clubcubase@steinberg.de. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions, and we hope that everyone stays safe and healthy and is making some great music. It's always wonderful to hear that people are getting their releases done, so I look forward to hearing Mark Rabin's project. All right, so we see, all right, and with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and we'll be back on Friday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. Goodbye.